Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my co-host, Kathleen Antrim.
And partner in crime, I have to say. Lots of
Yes.
crime, hopefully, of the very, very best kind. We have got a great guest today. I'm very excited to have best-selling author Mark Billingham. He has the Tom Thorne series. He's got a new series on Detective Miller, and he's won lots of awards. And we are really excited to have you, Mark. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk to you.
So I have a theory about writers and where we come from and how we get a little twisted or demented. And so I want to ask you about your childhood. What was it like growing up, and how do you feel your childhood may have contributed to you being a writer, as well as an actor and a comedian and a television writer, etc.? How do you think that influenced you?
I don't know. I was brought up just by my mum, me and my brother, and it was a pretty great childhood. I grew up in Birmingham, in the West Midlands of the UK, and I was one of those kind of strange kids who kind of liked school. Well, I say that I liked certain things about school. I was at the kind of school where, unless you were a sort of sporting superstar, which I wasn't, or an academic superstar, which I wasn't, you could be sort of anonymous until the day I discovered the school play. And, you know, every year there'd be these big school productions, musicals and all sorts of plays. And once I got into those, that was it. I just, the first time I came on stage, we were in a production of Oliver when I was about 12, and I played the Artful Dodger. And as soon as I walked on, I was going, "On the city yourself," and people clapped, and I just thought, "Oh, I'll have some of that. I like that." And from then on, it was just I was a massive show off, just a massive show off. But the thing I enjoyed more than anything, in all seriousness, was writing stories. You all have to write stuff at school, what I did in my holidays or my favorite pet or something. And I'd try and write these sort of funny stories. And the best thing in the world was if the teacher said, "Mark, can you come out to the front of the class and read your story out?" And that was, the biggest rush. I can still remember.
Sure.
I still remember the buzz I got out of that.
Now,
and essentially, that's what I'm doing. That's still what I'm doing. Hopefully to 30 kids. But no, I loved writing those stories at school.
Did you read as a child? Were you a reader?
Yeah, we had to read kind of good, we were given good books to read at school. Animal Farm and 1984 and To Kill a Mockingbird and all the kind of stuff you get. But we had one crazy teacher. He was, a lot of writers say they were inspired by their English teacher. With me, it was a maths teacher who would get bored in his own lessons. He was this crazy old kook called Len Bowles. He's long dead now, but he would get halfway through a lesson and go, "God, this is tedious, isn't it?" And we'd all be going, "Yeah." And he'd reach into this battered old leather bag and produce a copy of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. And he would read us Sherlock stories. This is from the age of 13 or something. And I just thought this was brilliant, obviously, because it wasn't maths, which is, this is why I love detective fiction, but I can't add up. I can still remember just being enthralled by these stories, by the character specifically.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Who this strange character was. And then I started discovering books for myself, going out and buying. And I can remember one summer, I'd probably have been 13, 14 maybe, buying Jaws and The Godfather.
Oh, wow.
I say buying, I may even have shoplifted them. I can't. Let's not get into that.
Let's just go with that. That's more interesting.
Let's go. I think I did. But reading these two books back to back and just going, "Oh my God," I didn't know a book could do that. Just the power of these.
And how old were you?
13, 14, maybe.
Sure. Okay.
Two of my favorite all-time books.
Oh,
both of them are brilliantly written and so well done.
And obviously, I hadn't seen the movies. I didn't know because I wasn't old enough to get in to see the movies. But I read these books. It helped probably that there are sort of dirty bits in both those books, which when you're a 13-year-old, you're a 13-year-old boy and you've never read anything like that. But just they just knocked me back into my. It helped that my first brush with popular fiction is two kind of classics, absolute classics of popular fiction. And I just thought, yeah, I want more and more of this. So from that point on, I was going out and reading any thriller / detective novel I could get my hands on, pretty much.
When you were littler, by chance, did you have any imaginary friends that you
Do you
played
know what? I don't think I did. Well, if I did, I've forgotten them, which is,
Or
no,
kill them, one or the other. Yeah.
I had
Could have
I think I had imaginary enemies.
been.
You know that they say that one of the obviously this doesn't apply to you or to me either, but that one of the greatest fear anyone has is public speaking. And obviously from an early age you realize that this is showtime. So this led you to stand-up comedy, and I'm fascinated by that. How did you get into stand-up comedy? What was it like actually doing it? And then how do you think that helps you now with your written storytelling?
Okay, so all I wanted to be from the age of about 12 was an actor. And I started, and I did for a while. I did a drama course, drama degree, and then I acted in various TV shows for a couple of years. But eventually, either I fell out of love with acting or acting fell out of love with me. And a lot of people around that time were drifting into stand-up in the UK, which was becoming a really big deal. This is the sort of mid-1980s. But it was just before it had become huge, when it became like comedy is the new rock and roll. That was the phrase of the moment. And I started doing it. And within 6 months, I was playing at the Comedy Store, which I still think is the best comedy club in the world, the Comedy Store in London. And did it for 20 years. Did it for the best part of 20 years.
Wow.
And loved it largely. Loved the time spent on stage. Loved those 20 minutes or those 40 minutes on stage. The sitting around in grotty dressing rooms at 2 a.m. and driving up and down the motorway because you got to do a gig in Nottingham and then a gig in Leicester and then you got to get back to London and all that stuff. It's a job for a single person. It's kind of hard when you've got young kids. Once I had young kids, I'd become the Comedy Store at 3 o'clock in the morning, after doing a show that starts at midnight, and I'd have 2 little kids jumping all over me or whatever, or a few hours later. So it couldn't last. But largely I loved it. And I didn't realize the stand-up and the writing overlapped by 5 or 6 years. I didn't do my last stand-up show until about 2006 or 2007, by which time I had half a dozen books out. But I was starting to travel so much with the books in other countries and stuff that something had to give. So I had to give up the stand-up. But it really did feed into the writing in a way. It took me a few years to realize just quite the extent of it. I mean, basically, a detective novel is structured like a joke. It seems
interesting.
It's all about timing. It's all about when you reveal key bits of information. And a joke, especially not a one-liner, but a kind of Shaggy Dog story joke, works the same way. And
it's a 3-act structure.
Yeah, right. And you're leading the audience down a garden path, and they think they know where the punchline's coming from, and then it comes from a completely unexpected direction. What comedians call the pull back and reveal, when the audience goes, oh, and it took me years to figure out, that those things were happening. I'll tell you the best example of it, I think, in popular thriller fiction is in Silence of the Lambs. Okay, and there's a moment towards the end of Silence of the Lambs when the SWAT team is descending, on what they think is the killer. And meanwhile, Clarice Starling is on the other side of the country, just tying up some loose ends. And the SWAT team creep up to the house and they ring the doorbell. And you cut, as you turn the page to the killer's dungeon. And he hears the doorbell ring. And that's when the reader buys the dummy. Okay, that's when you go, okay, I know what's going on. And the killer comes up the stairs and there's butterflies flapping around, and he opens the door and it's Clarice Starling. And you go, they're at the wrong house. She's at the right house. And it's a punchline. It's just a punchline, but it's a very line, So there are so many similarities and crossovers. Also, of course, you learn as a stand-up that you've got to engage that audience really quickly. I couldn't walk on stage at the Comedy Store and go, stick with me, I'll get funny in about 10 minutes. You've got to get them right away or they'll throw stuff. And I think the same is true with books. As a reader, I know that I'm giving a book 20 pages, 25 pages. And if it hasn't me in some way, a voice, some great hook, something, I'm putting it down and picking up another one. I'm that kind of reader, I'm afraid. And I hopefully write the same way. I'm aware that I haven't got long to get the reader on side and building towards a big finish and all that stuff. There are a lot of similarities. There really are.
What made you decide to write your first book? What was the impetus for that?
Well, I was just devouring crime fiction and collecting crime fiction. I mean, I was a crazy kind of collector of it. So I would get, first edition UK, first edition US, proof copies, everything. It was getting absolutely crazy. And my wife said, "You need to find a way to get books for nothing, or I'm divorcing you." So I started hanging around. I started reviewing crime fiction, hanging around at festivals, going to signings, meeting authors. I was kind of on the fringes of the community. And then I just thought, you know what? By this time, I'd been writing for TV. I'd written all sorts of jokes and articles. And I said, try and write one. I got to try and write one. So one summer in about 1999, the family were on holiday, and we rented this villa somewhere, and we'd put the kids to bed, and then me and my wife would sit outside with a beer, and I just started scribbling in this notebook. I had an idea, and I started writing, and by the end of the holiday, I counted the words. I can remember counting the words, and I'd written about 30,000 words.
Oh, wow.
In 2 weeks. And I remember thinking, this is about a third of a novel. Maybe it isn't, because I just thought it was so daunting. Writing a joke or a half-hour episode of a TV show compared with the novel. Some of them are like house bricks. I thought that's so much. But by the time I'd written a third of one, I thought, oh, okay. So I went home, I tidied it up. I sent those 30,000 words off. I got an agent. She sent those 30,000 words off. Like half a dozen publishers wanted to publish it. I was away on 30,000 words.
And I want to say for our viewers,
yes,
this does not happen.
I know.
It does not happen.
I'm well aware I had the luck of 50 writers.
They were obviously a very good 30,000 words. I mean, obviously, very, very good.
It was, do you know what? I'd seen it. I knew enough about thriller fiction to know that the hook was kind of important. Mm-hmm. So when I sent the manuscripts off, and of course in those days it was paper, But when I sent those 30,000 words off, I had a title page that I printed out as if it was a title page, and it had a shout line, like you see on posters. Yeah. And the shout, that first book, which would become Sleepyhead, was, "He doesn't want you alive, he doesn't want you dead, he wants you somewhere in between." And I sent that off, and a year later, that was on the side of London buses. So that shout line is what worked, I think.
So what did it feel like the first day you saw that on the bus?
Well, that was absolutely amazing. But the best feeling, and I can still remember exactly where I was at a big shopping centre in North London called Brent Cross Shopping Centre. I was with my wife. She was in Marks and Spencer's buying something. I was outside messing about on my phone, and I got an email from my agent just going, "This publisher wants the book." And that moment when it's going to be published is just like, oh my God, I can still, I still get hairs on the back of my neck.
Well, Sleepyhead was the first book in your Tom Thorne series. Who is Tom? Tell us a little bit about him.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true to say that I don't know any more about Tom Thorne than anybody that's read the books. I took a decision early on that I wasn't going to write a Bible. I wasn't going to say, this is where he goes to school, this is what he has for breakfast, all his family. I just put him on the page and just let him go. So that he grows. I hope he grows over what is now 19 books. But I don't, and the fact that I didn't do that means that I mess up. I will mess things up. I will get going, why are his eyes brown in book 6 and green in book 12?
Contacts.
And I just have to go, I messed up. But I think I'd rather do that than know everything, because while he's still unpredictable to a degree, because I don't know what he's going to do next. I don't mean that I don't mean that he's a character that takes me over and, I'm still the one doing the typing, but I don't have a plan for him. I never have. So, 19 books are like 19 chapters in a very long book about him, I suppose. He's a very different character to the one he was, because none of us that write the kind of books we do can do the things we do to these characters and then pretend it doesn't change them. Otherwise it's just a cartoon. We can't put them grief and loss and violence, book after book after book, and have them just bounce back. In the old Tom and Jerry cartoons when an anvil falls on Tom's head.
Right.
And his head becomes anvil shaped. Just for a couple of times, and then it goes back to normal. I want my characters to stay anvil shaped. If bad shit happens to them, they deal with that,
Well, tell us about your latest series and who is Declan Miller and what's his story? What's he all about?
Well, because my background is in comedy, I guess my first instinct when I'm writing is always a comedic one. But with Thorn, I've had to just pull that back because they're pretty dark books. There's humor, of course. There's humor in everything we write. There has to be. There has to be. I can't read anything that doesn't have some humor in it. But it's sort of gallows humor. It's dark humor. But with Declan Miller, I wanted to write a series where the comedy was front and center. And that's for two reasons, really. Firstly, because I wanted to indulge my passion for jokes. But also, I've really firmly come to believe that humor and seriousness are not mutually exclusive. You know, they are,
Right.
you know, you can write, you know, people talk about humor as if it's the opposite of seriousness, which it absolutely isn't. The opposite of seriousnse is triviality or unimportance. And
Right.
humor is not trivial and humor is not unimportant. So I'm still writing about, you know, what drives Miller is grief. Declan Miller is a detective, very different detective to Tom Thorne, set in the north of England, not London. And his wife has been murdered. His wife, who was also a detective, has been murdered kind of 6 weeks before the book starts, the first book. And he goes back to work, which he really shouldn't. But he goes back to work and he's absolutely driven by grief. But that grief manifests itself in a rather strange way. I mean, if there's one thing I know, there's no template for grief. It affects people in a variety of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And with Miller, it just means he doesn't really care anymore. He still cares about justice. He still cares about the victims of violent crime because he's been one. But he doesn't care what people think of him. He doesn't care what he says. If a thought pops into his head, it just comes out. So he upsets a lot of people. And I just loved writing him. I just really, really love. And I'm
That feels freeing.
Huh?
It's got to feel freeing to just to be
Yeah.
able to be that character on the page and just say whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as with Thorne, I have no plan for him. I have no Bible for him. So, you know, I never.
But you do have a second book getting ready to come out, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
There it is. Yeah, that's done. That's done. I mean, right now I'm writing the next Tom Thorne thriller because it's not like I haven't killed Tom off, not just yet. But yeah, when this Tom Thorne book is done, I'll be doing the third Declan Miller book. And I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying getting to know him. I think that might be the first time I've seen the American Jacket.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Really a cool cover.
Yeah, it's a great cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And that's coming out soon, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's coming out in June in the UK. I think it might be August.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah.
No, very exciting. So will you be on tour here? Will you be doing some events?
I haven't done a sort of full tour over here for a few years. I mean, it's I don't know how American writers do it every year. I mean, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. You know, I can tour in the UK, and most nights I'm back in my own bed. We're a tiny little country. You know, so I can go and do an event in Liverpool or Manchester or Nottingham or even Edinburgh or anywhere, and I'm home the next morning, or I'm home. You know, but here. I remember the very first time I toured here in about, I don't know, 2003 or something. I remember my wife seeing the itinerary and going, "Oh, you jammy bugger, that looks great. I'd love to go to New York, San Francisco and Phoenix and blah, blah, blah." And about a week into the tour, I think I rang her in tears going, "I want to come home."
Yeah, you don't get to see the cities. I mean, you're in
a... No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. That pattern of you fly into a city, you get met by somebody holding up a copy of your book at the airport, who then drives you around all day, going to bookstores where you sell 3 copies, you sign 3 copies, and then you do an event in the evening, which maybe 6 people come to, and then you go back. Do you have something to eat? Go back to your hotel, get up at 5 a.m., go to the airport, and do it all over again. And quite often you're flying from New York to LA, then back to Boston, then over to, you know, these tours are designed in a very haphazard fashion.
Right. I mean,
I've loved doing events over here, and I've done some great, you know, and I've made a lot of friends over here doing. But a full tour is, yeah, I'm too old. Can't do that anymore.
We don't look that old. So, was there anybody or anything that inspired you to write these characters that were kind of the prototype for Tom Thorne or Detective Miller?
No, I mean, wow, there were so many writers I loved. I mean, so many writers from both sides of the pond that I followed and still follow and still read slavishly. You know, the writers of great series fiction. You know,
Yeah.
Michael Connolly, who is the best crime writer on the planet, who has managed to maintain an incredible, just a supernatural degree of quality over 30 years or something. And writers in the UK, Ian Rankin and Val McDermid and John Harvey and people that just write great. I've always been a fan of series. So, you know, I've done standalone novels. I've done 4 or 5 standalone novels, but it's the series. The series is where my heart is. Although, you know, there are pros and cons to writing a series. It's tricky to keep the balance, to make a book that people that have read the previous books will enjoy, but can also work as an entry point for people that haven't read any of them. It's pretty tricky, right?
It is that.
How do you keep it fresh? Yeah, I mean, that would seem to get very difficult.
Yeah, well, keeping it fresh, and I learned from the likes of Mike Connolly, which is to step away every so often. You know, you write 3 or 4 of them, and then you need to step away and do something else, spend a year inside somebody else's head, and then you come back to your main series fired up. I mean, that's the theory. It doesn't always work, but yeah, you've got to step away and do something else. And I guess that's part of the reason I moved on to Declan Miller. I wanted to write a different sort of book. Which was scary. I mean, it was scary as all hell. As soon as I was halfway through the first book and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I could just be writing another Thorne novel. I know that will do okay. What am I doing? Touch wood, it worked out. So, but you know, you've got, if there's a little voice in your head telling you to do something, you know, it's a voice you ignore at your peril. I think we all know series that sell by date. We all know writers that are writing the same book essentially over and over again. You don't want to be that writer. So you've got to follow your heart, I think.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
Well, I'm working on what will be the 19th Tom Thorne novel right now.
Oh, yeah.
Which is going to upset some people.
Real people?
Oh, that's intriguing.
Or fictional people?
Well, people who are fans of the series who've read 18 of them. You know, I've got to bring the changes. I've got to do something a little bit out of the ordinary. I think I've also got to reflect the fact, and I know American crime writers such as Michael Connolly have already addressed this in their work. You can't write about the police in quite the same way that we did 10 years ago.
Right.
We've had our George Floyd moment in the same way that you guys did over here. And I'm writing about the Metropolitan Police that in a report not so very long ago has been just officially deemed to be racist and misogynistic and homophobic and all that stuff. So the cops are not the heroes anymore. It's pretty tricky. You've got to reflect that. So I'm writing a book that I hope addresses that. And within that story will shock some people, I think.
Oh, that'll be very interesting. Wow. I'll be looking forward to that. So, Mark, tell us where we can get your books.
Is it too pat to say bookstores?
No, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether that incredible network of independent mystery bookstores is quite as big as it was, the last time I toured over here. But all those great mysteries. I mean, I was in Poison Pen Bookstore in Phoenix, Arizona, about a week ago.
Yes, fabulous.
That's still a fabulous bookstore. So go order your books from Poison Pen Bookstore in Phoenix, Arizona, or online or your local bookstore. Or hey, I don't mind, and download it onto your device. I don't care how people read books. It's not, that's not my business.
As long as they keep reading, right?
As long as they keep reading and as long as they're paying for it. No. I mean, I've got a big bee in my bonnet about free content and all that stuff. I think people, especially the younger people who have grown up in an age where an awful lot of artistic content is free, kind of think it should be. Why should I have to pay for that? But they'll pay $10 for a cup of coffee and then feel expensive. Books for what they are cheap, and it's our living.
That's exactly right. I mean, if we want to continue to have interesting stories, you've got to be able to pay the bills. So
absolutely right. Absolutely,
Mark.
Right.
This has been fantastic. You have been a riot. We've really had a good time. We will definitely get you back down the road.
And I want to tell our viewers to please click that thumbs up. It helps with the algorithms, and subscribe. We can bring you more interviews. and Mark Billingham. Fantastic to have you. Can't wait to have you back on.
Oh, thank you. Just say the word, I'll be there.
All right.
Fantastic.
Thank you very, very much.
You both.
So-
Lovely to meet you.
So this has been another episode of Get to Know here on the Outliers YouTube channel. We'll be back with more great interviews. So check us out and we'll see you then.